We have to go look, look at the legs of the sheep. We have to reflect on the ways of our forefathers. Every tefillah, the Amida, always mentioned, Zocher Chasdei Avos. He should remember the merits of the forefathers. We're always drawing from that account. Now, if we could identify to some way with our forefathers, we could draw on their merit. But what about if a Jew doesn't in any way identify, doesn't value what they were? You understand? You can't draw on their account. You could only draw on their account if you're connected to them. You know, by the way, they say, are you a card-carrying member? Card-carrying member, then you know something, you're part of the so-called, you're part of the clan. But if you're not part of the clan and you don't want to be part of the clan, all of a sudden now you want to dip your hand to, many years ago in the 50s, if you remember, some of you can remember, but those who were around, Chafetz, before Pesach, would give out free packages to the poor. Literally, and there were lines around many of the synagogues in Manhattan that people who weren't able to provide themselves for Pesach, they would come with a box, they get a box, chicken and matzah and filter fish, all the basic needs for the Seder and for a good part of Pesach. And sometimes you'd have hundreds of people waiting, like in a line, it was like a food line. That's what it was. During the year, nothing. But because it was free. It's free, they're there to take. During the year, but at least there was something. They celebrated a Seder, whatever it is. But a person has no interest in that. Dalton, Horace Mann, what is the percentage of Jewish kids going there? Who didn't go to Talmud Torah? Who can't read Hebrew? Because the parents that don't belong to an Orthodox synagogue, so they didn't even prepare for the bar mitzvah, many of them. So what is this about? You want to draw on what? On the merits of the patriarchs. You don't even know who they were. If at least you'll have some level of connection to their ways. Although we can't even fathom even the most infinitesimal level of who they were. Avraham Avinu is referred to as the giant of giants. We can't even relate to what a giant was. He's the giant of giants. So could we even fathom what he was? And the other patriarchs, Yaakov was the most perfect of all the patriarchs. But at least to whatever degree, whatever our capacity is, that we want to identify with them. We want to emulate them. Understanding that we are their descendants. Their merit. I always say, anybody who says he's observant today because of himself, it's arrogance. I'm not talking about Baal Tshuva. I'm a Baal Tshuva, because when I had certain questions and I made certain decisions, and all my friends did not. And the person prides himself. He has a right to feel privileged. But to go and say, pride himself, or a Jew says, I'm observant, they're not, because I'm this. It's arrogance. Any Jew who's observant today is because he has some merit from a forefather. He had a grandfather who did something, and in that merit, that's why you're observant. Is it possible to survive a tsunami and a tidal wave and a typhoon all happening simultaneously? Humanly, it's impossible. The influence of this world, it seeps in so strongly, you should become asphyxiated. You should become drugged from everything. You walk in a shopping mall, the music, the visual, the smell, the fragrances, everything totally permeates you in a way which it could actually topple you. So of course, you have to take precautions. Asay l'chos yog b'Torah. Make fences. You don't go to certain locations because we're still human. But with every fence we make, every precaution, we're still exposed. How do you survive it? The answer is, despite that, Yaakov survived Lovan, Choron, for 20 years. Hashem says, I will watch over you. Hashem is watching over all of us. And whose merit? In our merit. Because somebody of a previous generation had went and sacrificed and did something special, and we being their descendants, we're able to draw on their accounts.
Am I?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But I might argue that because it is so difficult now to maintain proper Judaism, because of all these forces, which are greater now than maybe they ever were, the people that are maintaining their Yiddishkeit and are sending their kids to yeshiva and shomer Shabbos, shomer mitzvahs, whatever, that the reward for that is probably greater also than at any other time in the past.
No question. I mentioned him in the Chafetz Chaim. He had said that at one time, if you wanted to rise in rank in the armed forces to a high level of officer, it would take 30 years, 40 years. But in battle, a person go from private to colonel in 6 months if he does one heroic act. He says, today the battle is a forefront battle. We're in the midst of war. And doing anything which is contrary to what society is all about, that's a heroic act. We cannot fathom the way God values even the little bit we do. Therefore, it has multiple value of the previous generations. That's exactly what the Chafetz Chaim says. Look, only God could judge or evaluate. Even the person does the wrong thing. We're not here to judge anybody. But you still have to call a spade a spade. A person violates Shabbos, he doesn't observe Shabbos. Why, when? We're not talking to that. That's for God to decide. But in terms of the one who does it, what is the value of that accomplishment? It's something we can't even fathom because of the state of, as we're saying, we're in this four-front battle in every direction, every moment. And despite that, we're still observing and holding on. That it's something goes beyond heroic. That's the Chafetz Chaim. And it is the fact. I'll tell you the truth. We speak about siyata d'shmaya. What young people have to go through today. We were raised in a time where the environment wasn't as toxic as it is today. In terms of, it's almost literally, it's like a drugged environment. If we would be younger, could we really control our temptations? I'm not sure. Not sure. What young people have to contend with today is not what we had to contend with when we were younger. It's a different level of struggle. And they are, and yet they succeed. The answer is because they merit a siyata d'shmaya. They have a divine assistance to be able to contend with those issues, and they also have merit. Maybe they have merit because the parents raised them a certain way. The merit is their parents. So every generation provides a merit for the following generation because the following generation has a greater challenge than the previous generation. And that's the way it goes. After the war, you know how many Jews, because of what they experienced, they threw Judaism away and they were angry and they wanted nothing to do with God. But many Jews said, despite that, we will strengthen we will maintain our identity. Although they were pain, they lost their families, lost their children, lost who knows what. We can't even relate to what they went through, the horrors they went through. What they were, a famous word from the Satmar Rebbe. He says, if you ever meet a Jew with the numbers on his arm, today you don't see very many of them, take a blessing from them because they are special Jews. Their blessing has great value. That's what the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoelu, said to people. Okay, the ones with the numbers, were they such devoutly righteous people? They weren't. But to be able to still identify as a Jew, going through those hell and the horrors of the camps and whatever they went through, they are tzaddikim. They're like holy martyrs. Despite that, therefore their brocha has phenomenal value. So because it's interesting, the Chafetz Chaim writes, in the 1600s there was a Tatar. His name was Chmielnicki. Chmielnicki was the equivalent of Hitler. He destroyed most of Eastern Europe. This was the time of the Shach. The Shach, it's called Tach V'Tat. They were the pogroms of Tach V'Tat. It was as bad as the Crusades. Good part of Eastern Europe was they were plundered, raped, murdered. Towns were torched. It was disastrous. Chmelnytsky. And this was the 1600s. Right after that, there was like such a resurgence of greatness in Torah in the 1700s. The Vilna Gaon. And many people, which were not the Vilna Gaon, but you can't imagine, the level of resurgence of spirituality was phenomenal. Why? Because since all these people, they died because they were Jews, they died al Kiddush Hashem, therefore, in that merit, Hashem says, you know something? It's coming back with such force, even Satan can't deal with the force the way it's coming back. It's in the merit of all those who were killed because they were Jews. I mean, the Holocaust, this resurgence of Torah, it started in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. One time a yeshiva when I went to yeshiva, 180 boys was a very large yeshiva. Today, it's like nothing. Today, they have 1,000 students. Lakewood has 8,000 students. These numbers are unheard of. This is besides married and other people in the community. It's unheard of. Where does this all come from? This is all built on the ashes, unfortunately, of the Jews who died as Jews. That's what this is all built on. Because the only way we're coming to the final goalpost is only with this. And without this, you can't come to it. And that's exactly what the Jewish people say to Hashem. How do we survive it? It's impossible. You know, the Nazis, there's a story during the war that, you know, the Nazis, they were demonic beyond demonic. They came into a Jew's house and they forced them out of the houses and loaded them up the trucks. And they come in and these two Nazis, they see a bookcase and they see a Vilna Shas. It was known, there was a printing press in Vilna. It was called Achim Rom Valmona. That was the name of it. The brothers Rom, R-A-M, or R-O-M, and the widow. They were the printers. They printed the Vilna Shas in Vilna. And the first thing Nazis did when they came to Vilna, they destroyed that printing press. They didn't want any Jewish books to be published. And when these Nazis, they came in, they saw this leather-bound Talmud, set of Talmud, they lost their minds. They took it out, they started to tear the bindings, and they went to the balcony, just threw everything. They went uncontrolled, they went mad. You understand what this is? And the Jews see this. And that's the way they went. They shot their children. It was not to be believed. And these Jews in the concentration camp prayed. Could you imagine? After experiencing this, they were, whatever little mitzvah they could have, they prayed. A shofar. They gave their lives for this. You know what this is? You know what kind of merit that generates? This is mega merits. These are heroes. So those heroic acts, that's the future. That's where we're coming from. So if you identify with the patriarchs, then you could draw in their account. Now, there was a story not too long ago. There was a person, he presented himself, I think, as Rockefeller, as he was from the family. And he made all kinds of business contacts and relationships because he was a Rockefeller. Turned out the man was what's the name? He was a charlatan. He wasn't. You understand? But you know, you can't fool God. You can't draw on merits unless you're the real McCoy. Real McCoy means you really have to be the real thing, at least to some degree, behaving to a degree the way they behaved. You can't be what they were. We can't even be infinitesimally what they were, but we want to identify with who they were. If you want, then you could draw on their merit. You draw on their merit, then you have all this divine protection. We say in the Amidah, Zoche Chasdei Avos. God remembers the kindness of the patriarchs. What happens when those kindnesses are exhausted? Maybe go and live neighbor. As long as those merits are there, there's what to draw upon, Mashiach is not coming yet. Of course, we still could survive based on that merit. But once we depleted all those merits, God brings the Redeemer to their descendants. Lamad Shemo B'Yava, for the sake of his name with love. That because we are the descendants, there's that love to us. Although we're failing and there's no more, it's been all depleted, but we're still special. Because you are the grandchildren of the patriarchs. Although there's no merit to continue giving you the challenges. Because by then, the actions are no longer attributed to ourselves. Doesn't make a difference. It's not in our merit. We don't have the worthiness. But because we are B'nai V'neihem, we are the descendants, therefore he brings us to the Goel. Because there is that level of continuum. There is a connection to them. But if we severed, God forbid, the connection, something, God throws you to the dogs. God forbid.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I think you once mentioned, though, that account will never be depleted. Because every time we do a mitzvah, it's reaccredited to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So even though we're using merit, we're constantly replenishing the source of it.
Okay.
How do we understand that?
Okay. Good question. It bothered me, this question. What happens? You have a very large debt, and you have merit. The merit of the Avos, of the patriarchs, was a mega merit. It's lasted us a few thousand years. We're still drawing on that account. But factually, what we're putting in, we're taking out more than we're putting in. So what happens if the need is greater? There's not enough to take out to cover the debt, to address the issues. At one time, we spoke about the national debt was this. Talk about trillions of dollars. We never even heard the word trillions. You have billions we could talk about maybe, or hundreds of millions, trillions. They say, our descendants will never pay off that debt unless we somehow streamline or cut back. It's not going to happen. So whatever we generate, even though it's true, there is left, but we're talking about the crumbs left. It's not enough to contend with it. So to merit that special divine assistance you need to be able to survive, it's not there. Therefore, the best thing is he brings the Redeemer and he brings it to an end, to a close. It's very interesting. The difference between the Haskalah movement and the Reform movement. In Germany and Hungary, they had weddings. They wanted to emulate the Christians because they believed that the reason why there's anti-Semitism is because our profile is too Jewish. And if we behave more like the non-Jews, we socialize with them, we eat non-kosher, we even marry them, and we assimilate, and eventually many of them converted. In a 30-year period in the 1800s, 30% of German Jewry converted to Christianity. 50% in a 30-year period converted to Christianity in the 1800s. This is the time of Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn's own daughters were rabid anti-Semites, although they were born Jewish. The Chassam Sofer was one of the ones who fought Reform movement. He forbade you should have a wedding in a synagogue. Why? Because since the Christians, they have the weddings in churches, the Reform are the ones who introduced, and what do you think? The synagogue wasn't called a synagogue. It was called a temple. It had to have that special, and they had the weddings in the temples. He says, something, that's what drew us closer to Christianity. We wanted to mimic them, imitate them, to bring us closer. So he said, you're not permitted. The sermons the rabbi gave in shul had to be in Yiddish. Chassam Sofer said. Can't be in Hungarian, can't be in German. Why? Because in the churches, you speak the vernacular of the people. We're not them. We may live in the country, but we're not who they are. We have to retain our Jewish identity. There's a famous story, the Mendelssohn, originally had translated the Bible into German. And he brings it to the Noda Yehuda, who was the chief rabbi in Prague. And he says that he wanted to get an approbation on it. German, Bible translated into German, the first Bible. Mendelssohn was raised as an observant Jew. The Orch Laner, who was one of the leading Torah sages of the 18th, 19th century, was from Germany. He was his teacher. And he brings it to the Noda Yehuda, and he puts it on the table. Very accurate translation. As he puts it on the table, he takes it, throws it on the floor. He says, "Why are you doing that?" He says, "Don't you realize the reason why I put this out because I want to bring the uneducated brethren closer to Judaism." The Rabbi Yechezkel Landau said to him, "I'm no fool. This German Bible is to bring Jews closer to the German culture. Ultimately, that he should assimilate. That's your intention. Do me a favor, just get out." And he picked it up off the floor and walked out with his Bible, with his translation. And that was it. So the Reform wanted to get closer, to be more like the Gentile. The Haskalah movement, the Enlightenment movement, was a whole different movement. They didn't want to be like the non-Jew. They themselves understood anti-Semitism, and they understood the Gentile hates the Jew. But they felt that the practices are archaic. It doesn't make any sense. It's cultural. Judaism is a culture. Yiddish, these were the Yiddishists, the Bundists. That's what they were about. God is not part of our lives. We have to defend ourselves. To be Jews, our identity, and whatever it is. That's what it was about. It wasn't because they wanted to be. They had an understanding. You see, the difference was in Germany, they gave the Jews citizenship. In Russia, the Jews were never treated ever as equals. There was the Pale. Jews weren't even permitted to go into certain parts of Russia. In Petrograd, a Jew was not permitted to go there unless you had a permit. So you couldn't fool yourself with the Russians. There's no way you could even coexist with them. It was survival always. Germany, Hungary, the Jews were treated almost like equals. They were given citizenship. They had rights. So they felt, so why now? So now we have rights. We have to get closer to them. We have to imitate them. We have to, of course, up to the point of assimilation. But you realize, you go to the very end, you go put yourself out on a limb to the very end, you don't come back so quickly. And you go off. You eat with them, you socialize with them, you marry them. And eventually, you accept their religion and you convert to be whatever that is. There was an article recently written on, Barr, Attorney General Barr. His father was raised as an Orthodox Jew. His mother, he married Irish Catholic. That's his mother. He and his brothers, they went to private school in Manhattan. I think Dalton, one of those schools, or Horace Mann. That's where they went. He himself says he has Orthodox relatives. They're not related to him because he's not a Jew. His mother wasn't Jewish. What's this all about? For some reason, he believed that's where and eventually his father converted. His father converted to Christianity. It's not he was a Jew married to a non-Jew. He converted. That's to that degree. Okay? You understand? The moment you go in that direction, it's just a question before it ends. Many years ago, when I used to have my debates with the famous professed atheist, and the first time I met with him, we spent about an hour and a half speaking to him. And we started, I was very respectful. But when I saw how forceful he was to me and disrespectful he was, so literally I wiped the floors with him. I wiped the floors with him. And he calls me up. I get a call from the secretary. I thought after doing what I did to him, there's no way he wants to see me again. He wants to see me. He asked me, could I come again to his office? The first time I came to his office, he had a large office. He walks in, he's lying spread out on a couch, and he says, "Hi, Rabbi," lifts up his hand. "Hi, Rabbi." Okay? Okay, it's okay. Next time I came, he was waiting at the elevator to greet me when I came to his office. So he says to me, "Did you leave the boxing gloves home?" That's the first question he asked me. I said, "No boxing glove." I said, "You know something? You want to behave like a barracuda? I'll treat you like a barracuda. You want to behave like a normal human being? I'll talk to you like a normal human being. No problem." I left the boxing gloves home. So I come to his office. His secretary asked me, would I like a drink? So he says, his secretary said, "Would you want Diet Coke or regular Coke?" I said, "I don't have diet." So he says to me, "Is that to accommodate the 20th century? You know, that's like modernism, because of diet, you know, rather than that." I said, by name, I said, "I thought we left the boxing gloves home. You want to put the boxing gloves back on? We'll go put on the boxing gloves back." So this is the point I want to make. So he says to me, he says, "Why did I ask you to come back?" He says, "As much as I don't believe in God, as much as whatever my position is, but one thing's true, that the closer you are to the core, you survive as a Jew. You're at the periphery, you fall off the edge, you never come back. So I want you to help me believe that there's a God." That was the beginning of our discussion. Those who left, who go to the end, who don't want to identify, they're gone forever. The closer you to the core, and his position is survival of the Jewish people. Let it be religion, let it not be religion, whatever it is, doesn't make a difference. He wants there should be a Jewish people. And if keeping the Jewish people Jewish is keeping closer to the core, whatever it's to teach him, doesn't make a difference to him. Teach him that there's a God, teach him whatever, teach him Torah. As long as it'll keep him Jewish, he says you can teach him Chinese. If that's going to keep him Jewish, I'm for it, I'll back it. And that's the story. But factually, you can't fool yourself. Things haven't changed. And I met with him endless times after that. But you know, sometimes you can't get it out of your system. You understand it is, but somehow you just can't wrap your head around it. Because there's something which doesn't allow you. And you know what that is? That's called the evil inclination. He has merit that he did a lot of good things, Jewishly speaking. A lot of good things. But unfortunately, himself personally, what he professes and what he says, he's not there. Not there. And I said, only God judges people. We're not here to judge anybody. But factually, you still have to deal with the reality to see what people have to contend with, that as much as you're nearly there, this evil inclination runs rings around us and puts roadblocks and creates impediments and puts all kinds of things in our mind. Just end with one story. This person calls me up, the same person, and they created a fund, a Jewish education fund. Him with somebody from Cleveland. This person in Cleveland, his name is Mandel. He's also one of these mega wealthy people, wealthier than this person. And this Mandel, all his children married out, all of them, every one of his children. And they're creating this mega fund that any community that wants to have a Jewish day school, they're willing to give seed money $300,000. Let it be Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, whatever it is, they will give $300,000 as seed money to start the school. So he calls me up and says to me, "Your friend, Ira Rennert, will not give me a penny for this fund. Why not?" So I said to him, I'm going to explain to you. I said, "Let me ask you a question. You're a professed atheist." I said, "If I would come to you and you're the expert in Wall Street, I would tell you, I want to teach you something about Wall Street." And I could give him an approach. The man looks at me like I lost my mind. "You're talking to me, I'm the expert on Wall Street. You're telling me how to do Wall Street? Where do you get this arrogance? I ran it's an Orthodox Jew, a believing Jew. You're going to tell him what Judaism is and what Jewish education is. And you're upset that the man doesn't even want to listen to you. It's like me advising you on Wall Street. You want to advise him how to do Judaism. Well, you yourself, you denied it. There's a God." Therefore, I said there's nothing to talk about. We'll end here today. I just want to mention today we're going to start the